Love is love. Hello and welcome to this special program, the Rainbow Summit, brought to you by the Quint, powered by Accenture. This is going to be such an interesting conversation because while we've been celebrating Pride Month, all of June, the big mudda, the big conversation has the Pride Month only just become about rainbow flags and parades and drag parties and pride parties, or are we actually managing to hit where it actually matters the most, our workplace? The conversation today is about something very, very specific. If you're part of the LGBTQI community, do you feel you have the same rights, the same benefits, and the same kind of work lifestyle you would as someone who probably is not part of the community? This is about inclusivity at the workspace. Today is going to be a very interesting discussion because a lot of the people who are joining us on the show come from hugely different and diverse backgrounds. All right. I want to first introduce you to everyone and then we get into the discussion. Say hello to Mathew, popularly known as Maya, the drag queen, influencer, theater actor, drag artist. What's up, Alex? How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Paris?
Very, very good. So nice to have you on the show. We're also going to be joined by Aishwarya Ayushmaan, who's a Delhi-based human rights lawyer by day and turns into Lush Monsoon by night. Actually, Ayushmaan has a really, really, really cool story, and I can't wait for them to actually tell you what it is. How are you doing?
I'm great, Paris. Nice to meet you.
Very nice to see you. All right, Moulee is going to be joining us. Moulee is the co-founder and director of Queer Chennai Chronicles and a DEI expert. Moulee, so good to have you on the show.
Thank you, Paris, and I'm glad to be here.
मैं आपसे detail में पूछने वाला हूँ विस्तार में what DEI is, because I know there's a lot of understanding we're going to get from this. We'll get to that in just a bit. Also joining us today is Dr. V.S. Priya. Very interesting because she's the first transgender doctor in Kerala. Born as a man, started a transformation journey actually age of 30 and deeply accepted by her family. And it's such an interesting, incredible, empowering story. Dr. Priya, so good to have you on the show.
Thank you, Paris.
And of course, the man himself, we've got CA Venkatraghavan, who is the MD at Accenture India. He heads the HR for Accenture Operations Business for India and Sri Lanka. Very, very busy man. He also has a lot of hats, nationally ranked in lawn tennis in the under 12 and under 16 categories. He's going to tell you a lot of stuff about his life, about Accenture and what they're doing. Venkat, you're going to be literally the icon for how I think corporates in India should actually function.
Hey, hi, Paris. Thank you for having me here. And thanks. That was a very flattering introduction.
Listen, so let's just start from you, because really someone as me, right? Someone like me who's also CEO founder, actually look up to what you're doing with Accenture, right? Now, when a big company like yours, when you start setting the tone, when you start sort of writing that narrative of what inclusivity at a workplace is like, it actually creates a templates for younger companies to follow this thing. So what was the first step you took as a corporate to say, hey, this is what we need to put our money where the mouth is?
Well, the point that you made around narratives is extremely important. And our narratives has been one of equality. And, the two things that we have not taken our foot off the pedal is, regardless of in the last 12 years, what our legal position has been as a country, I think we've continued to staying focused within the purview of that to make sure that members of the community have a safe and secure place to come out, express themselves. At least at work. I think the second is we've not taken the foot off the pedal on the sensitization around what LGBT is and making sure that people across the spectrum as far as possible had visible role models. I think those were the two things that we stayed focused on through the last 12 years. Personally, I was outed by someone.
And these visible role models? Okay. To your delight or to your dismay?
Actually, to my delight, it was quite a relief. Somebody who knew accidentally walked into a room full of leaders and said, hey, you guys are lucky to have Venkat, he's an out leader. And I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. And I think there has really been no looking back, because that really allowed me just to be the face of what we were doing for a very long time, until we have now many other visible role models.
I think what's become so interesting about the narrative, the word that you're also using now, is the fact that today you've got so many role models, whether it's the influencer area, whether it's the legal area, whether you've got the celebrity era, because I think a lot of the people that we look up to today, because they're openly saying, hey, I'm part of the community, is actually adding so much value, right? Speaking of the influencers, Alex, you're an artist.
Yeah.
So I feel artists have the luxury of being expressive. You work for yourself. You are your own boss. My question to you is, if you worked in a corporate, okay, you think you would have been able to be as open and as blasé about your life as you are as an artist?
So Paris, I have like 8 years of corporate experience with me. So for me, I've seen both the sides of the coin. So I had seen people not being accepting of me, and also having an environment which is very homophobic. Like, though the company was saying, no, 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 we are all up for LGBTQ community, and this was way back in 2011. They were still not accepting towards the LGBTQ community, even if I was at the process of trying to figure myself out. They were not accepting at all. So for me to come to a point to an organization where the boss actually told me, hey, if you want to dress up 7 days a week in as a drag queen, you can do it. That is a lot of energy from my side, but I did. But then having the option, giving the option, saying that, hey, you can be whoever you want to be and you can express the way you are, was a great journey, from going from being part of a homophobic work environment to an environment which makes you very accepting. It's a really great transformation, and it made me feel better as a person as well.
I like one of the things you said, Alex, about the fact that, a lot of companies are now trying to do the rainbow washing, but they're trying to sound inclusive. But the question is, I don't know how real they really are. Aishwarya, I have a question for you, since you are the legal here. I think a lot of the brands and the companies now are trying to sound more inclusive. They're saying, hello, we are LGBT friendly, all that is fine. But I feel very often that may not actually permeate to every single employee of the company, right? Do you sometimes see that happens that, because also today people are afraid of being called homophobic, right? So there was a time when the homosexual people would hide, and now the homophobic people hide. So you feel like there's still an undercurrent of people being homophobic, but they're trying to hide it at the workplace? Do you think that happens, Aishwarya?
Of course, that happens all the time. Like, I come from the NGO sector, and you're supposed to be a little more woke there. You're supposed to be a little more inclusive, at least on paper. But the reality is that even though they may not shame you for being gay or being queer, and they may not outrightly say that you cannot do this because of your queerness, but they always find other ways to limit your thing by sometimes telling you to maybe okay, dress appropriately, or tell you not accommodate your life as a queer person within that whole corporate sphere, or the workspace, because for me as a drag artist, my life, as you said, that it involves me being a lawyer during the daytime and going and performing as a drag queen in the nighttime. So for me to be able to do these two things, I do need a little bit of flexibility. I do need a little bit of space. That is sometimes that's not very thought through in the companies or in the
You've ever
workspaces.
felt a client who comes to you is not able to take you seriously? Sometimes you think, because of a drag, saying, it's a lawyer, and will he be able to handle a case? Will they be able to handle a case? You think that ever happens when they see you in drag, say, bhai, ye kya karenge hamare case ka?
Right, of course. That's not just with clients, but with my own colleagues. In fact, so half my colleagues know about my drag persona, half of them do not know about it, because the fear is that if they do get to know about it, they'll stop taking me seriously. They'll be like, "Acha, theek hai, this person does theater, they do drag, so fir inko seriously kaise le sakte hum?"
You
Because
think
law is supposed to be so serious, yeah.
you think there'll be a day when you'll be able to go in court, and obviously court has their own clothes and stuff, but you think that will be a thing which can happen at some point?
I would
If,
love
say,
to.
what happens if you dress as a corporate woman and went into
Yeah,
court?
yeah.
You think we're at a point where that could actually happen?
Not really. That's one
Not
reason
really.
why I do not prefer going to the courts, because it's so black and white there, it's so heteronormative within
It
the
is.
court system.
It is.
Like the way you dress, the way you talk, everything. So for me, that's one reason why I do not prefer to go there. So we have to limit our options also, because of that, yeah.
Interesting that you would use the word heteronormative, because the person who's entirely broken that mold of heteronormative is right here with us, Dr. Priya. First of all, that journey of yours is very interesting for multiple reasons. When you started your transformation at the age of 30, now that's a very interesting age, because that's not the age that normally people do that at, right, Priya?
Yeah, actually, I didn't plan any. I didn't had any plans of transformation till the age of 30, because see, I was constantly busy with my life, with my academics, with my career, with my multiple workplaces. I was totally busy. But then at the end of the day, I felt like I had some frustrations within me because I was totally enacting as another person for the whole of my life till my 30 years. So I felt like if at all I'm not planning a change, it's gonna end up. My life is gonna mess with
Of
everything
course.
around.
Dr. Priya, which field of which area of medicine do you practice? What kind of doctor are you?
I'm an Ayurvedic physician. I'm a
Okay.
postgraduate.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm working in a private hospital here in my place, Thrissur.
I'll tell you why I'm asking this. And I want to ask this specifically to Aishwarya and you, because doctors and lawyers, these are two professions where, there is a lot of, and I'm sure you guys face this, and I'm going to be the devil's advocate there because I'm part of the community. I can tell you everything, and I'm just putting the other perspective for you there, right? Doctor, do you ever feel someone comes to you and calls you deeply derogatory words that very often I'm sure you've heard so much? I'm sure at some point now you've got a thick skin, you don't really care. But has it ever really broken you and say, hey man, I'm a professional, I know what I'm doing, look beyond the skin? Has it ever happened to you?
Actually, no. My answer is no because I was very much concerned about my transition because I didn't had any direct contacts or connections with the community, trans community here in Kerala. I did my research myself. I collected the resources myself. I discussed everything with my parents, and they took the initiative for my change, for my transition. And I was very much conscious about my looks during my transition because, see, my profession is like I'm directly facing patients. I'm not facing a computer screen. I'm directly facing the public. So I was very much conscious. I felt like at a point I felt like I'll lose my profession, I lose my career. Because if patients hesitate to come to a doctor like me, the
Correct.
hospital, it's a private hospital, they have all the freedom to suspend me or dismiss me from my profession. So it's like I thought of
Correct.
thinking about another profession in between my transition. I thought of learning cosmetology because it's a safe ground for transgenders in Kerala. So I joined the course in
Zebra.
between,
Correct.
in between I joined the course of cosmetology. And by the way, my transition was a success story. Medias here took it in a very positive sense, and it was
In
a
a very
success.
positive sense, yeah.
And I could continue my profession. Considering my patients, I had to educate them. I had to sensitize them. Not only patients, my workspace, uh, even my colleagues, my doctors, my doctor friends also, even surgeons. They were
Yeah.
also not aware of all these stuff. About transition, about transgenders, about gender, about sexuality. They were also messing up the story.
They have a lot
They
of
were
questions
discussing
actually. Yeah. And I'm so happy you said that because yeah, I'm so happy you said that because sometimes, I feel a lot of the people who may not be from the LGBT community, sometimes they don't know any better. Sometimes they actually have questions because they don't understand trans. So I'm so glad you're educating them because very often, I think sometimes we mistake them being oblivious to being insulting, which they don't intend to be. Because you talked about sensitizing people at the workplace. Moulee, I want to come to you as the co-founder and the director of Queer Chennai Chronicles. You're obviously working with the team, right? How do you make sure that as the founder, you're constantly sensitizing your team to create an adequately inclusive workplace, an LGBTQ friendly workplace? How do you actually permeate that down in any system? And let's start with how you do it so others can replicate that.
All right. So firstly, my DEI work, the diversity, equity, and inclusion work is focused towards corporates. And Queer Chennai Chronicles was later in life, like once I left the corporate life, is when I started. It's focused on literature. And Queer Chennai Chronicles predominantly has queer persons. We engage with queer persons, writers, translators, and artists. And one of the vision and the mission that we have is to promote diversity and narratives of queer persons through their works, writings, and translations. And also the focus is on non-English languages, because we feel that to reach people, to reach the masses, it needs to be in the language of the mass. And to your question, how do we promote it is that we constantly have this discussion. We talk about, say, for example, since it's literature, for us, we talk about like, does this sentence, does this word, does it come across as a slur for any other community? Like, how does this perceived by other communities, not specifically the LGBT community, but then other minorities? How do we use this word? These kind of conversations we constantly have, because when we talk about inclusion, when we talk about change of mindset, it's not just specific to a workplace, because workplace is part of the society that we are in. And we are essentially changing the systemic biases that we are having within ourselves, within each one of us. And to change that, it's important for us to challenge our whole thought process, what we have been taught growing up, and our surroundings, our homes, our friends, the content that we consume, all these things influence the way we think. And to challenge this is something very difficult for us. And it's a journey. That's what I say, DEI, inclusion is a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. And once we recognize that this is a journey, I think we all would be there. We all need to walk towards there along with our differences, along with our biases. And I think we need to shed those biases on the way.
So, interesting you're saying, because we have to walk that journey together. Venkat, I want to level with you, okay? Because I could deal with some help here. In my company, for example, I'm an open LGBTQ activist for years together. I have people that we have hired in the company. Now, I head the company, right? So my company has a template for what the boss can be like. Yet, when we were trying to hire people, Venkat, what happens is, in a company, there are people who will pull each other's leg, they'll make fun, they'll do some stuff. And it's all stuff people do for fun, right? They're joking. It's also very harmless. And one of the things which I sort of heard from a lot of the straight people in my office was, they said, why is it that people in the LGBTQ community, we have to be around eggshells with them? If you're talking about equality, just like we will backslap a friend and make some fun of them, and, we can occasionally pull someone's leg. They said with people from the LGBT community, we have to be really on eggshells because they're too oversensitive. And I think they have a point there. You think they're onto something there, because also part of inclusivity means you should be treated like anyone else. Why should you get special treatment? You think that's a double-edged sword there, Venkat?
No, it isn't. I love the question, by the way. Thank you. I don't think it is. And I think one of the things in our, I'll give you two perspectives. One of the things in our own sensitization programs is we tell allies as well as members of community and anybody else to really step back and address any poor humor that comes through. Now, in the spirit of true equality, I don't think it's a question of if every other perceived minority puts up with it, are people in the LGBTQI community being more sensitive to it. My personal view is I don't think anybody should have to put up with it, right? A joke necessarily is supposed to be humorous, respectful at the same time. And we even go one step further. And I personally, whenever I'm speaking to a group of employees or really to anyone, I say each of us have a circle of influence and a circle of conflict. You have to operate on the intersection of it, right? Now, if you're hearing a poor joke, sometimes people come and tell me it's somebody very senior, right? How do I address it? You don't need to address it, right? If you're comfortable, you could stop and say, that's not in good taste. If you're not comfortable, report it to someone who can in turn take action, right? So to answer your question in brief, no, absolutely. I don't think it's about eggshells. I think it is about any perceived minority actually every human being deserves to be respected, treated equally. And no joke in poor taste, should be justified.
Should be justified. Now, the one other thing which, because you really are the man to talk about with employment and money and everything, there's for years been a gender pay gap, all right? Even in Bollywood, actresses have always made far less money than actors have. Okay, in other workspaces, women have made much lesser money than men have. You think also in workspaces today, somehow people who might identify as being part of the community are somehow paid lesser because they're somehow not taken seriously? Because I know it's a lot of people who say, "Hey, we do the same work," but for some people, reason people think we're caricatures. You think that actually is a thing?
Pay inequality is definitely a thing, and it needs to be addressed, and it has to be done extremely consciously. I'll start by saying, I think, we definitely look at equal pay for equal jobs, with similar experience, and constantly continue to review it and every single year adjust what needs to be done. Now, why is it a real thing? It's not a real thing because somebody, it could be a conscious real thing, but it can also be many a times a very, very subconscious real thing. And it is due to perceived notions of what, and typically when we say pay inequality, it is again the perceived demographic that is a minority in the given group, right? And it is because I think it exists today because there are no laws against checking it. There are no scientific methodologies that are standardized to check it. Third, I think it creeps in. Even if it doesn't creep it consciously, I think it creeps in many a times due to unconscious perceptions or subconscious perceptions of what the perceived minority can or cannot do. Their availability, ambition, drives, aspirations, right? How well do you fit in is itself a criteria in many people's mind, right? And I think it's very difficult to now separate and say how much contributes to what, but those are all real factors that absolutely need to be addressed. So in short, since I'm taking the corporate view to this, I think if not already doing so, I would recommend that there have to be absolutely scientific ways of determining any pay inequalities and correct it at periodic gaps, because otherwise very soon you become very unattractive to good talent.
I'm glad you said that, because in the corporate sector, you see, but from the industry that I come from as an actor, Bollywood as an industry, for example, a lot of the people very openly talk about the fact that they're from the LGBTQIA, whether it's makeup artists, designers, and we don't face this, right? In this industry, we don't have that problem. Alex, any word on, because, Venkat talked about influencing so heavily. Any perspective of yours as a theatre artist, as an influencer, when you're perhaps doing corporate shows, when you're doing anything like that? Do you think that there's some sort of an interesting, when you're putting out these reflections, when you're actually motivating people to be able to come out there, you think you've ever done a show with some corporates where somebody said, yeah, man, I can be out, I can be open, I don't have to think? Alex, any perspective on that?
So I recently did an event with Toastmasters, and Toastmasters is a venue where a lot of people from corporates turn up and they start talking about their experiences. So I had a senior official from Infosys who said, Alex, can you please come and please advise people from the Toastmasters in Infosys to come and remove their, they keep hiding behind cameras whenever there is events happening. So they were like, he was telling me, please come and pep them up, please help them to, do better job, because we are ready to accept them the way they are, in whatever way they want to express themselves. So I was like, listen, I can't do the difficult job. You have to be there and you have to make sure that they are comfortable with themselves and with you at the same time. So it's a very what is the word to use? It's like a give and take. You can't just be like, bring in another source and tell them to do the hard. It's also two parties at the same time.
On the bright side, I feel, and this is probably a ray of hope, and Dr. Priya, I'm very curious to see. This is what I feel like. Gen Z, I think, is a little more politically correct, and I think they make more of an effort to be more inclusive. I feel, and a lot of the reason I'm taking from what Alex was saying is the fact that when I keep doing a lot of these corporate shows, I'll have a lot of these older men who might come to me. Sometimes they might be flirting, they might be hitting on me, but they were also very politely kind of saying, आप लोग बोल सकते हो, हमारी generation वाले नहीं बोल सकते. So, the older people, I feel they want to do it, but they feel like now they can't. The younger guys, on the other hand, the older people are almost looking up to the younger guys, and they're living so free. Dr. Priya, as someone who's a trans doctor, do you ever feel in your corporate structure, or in your work environment, you feel like the millennials and the Gen Z guys are a little more accepting of you as a professional than perhaps the older generation would be? You think there's a little generation gap there?
Yeah, definitely. Generation gap is definitely there because, as I told before, even the senior physicians or senior surgeons bullying around me during my transition procedure. And I had to, sensitize them. I had to do my friendly talks with them to, make them my friends, because they were keeping a distance from me, thinking I am somebody else. I'm an alien coming from another planet or something like that. Being a trans woman, being a trans person, So I had to educate them. Definitely there is a generation gap. Older people have lesser acceptance since they have already learned something, and they don't give space for unlearning things. So it's like, definitely there is generation gap, and younger people, younger colleagues,
Is there?
it's easier for them to accept me.
The good part about your story is the fact that in a world where we're constantly saying it's terrible and this happens, that happens, all your stories come with so much hope, because I love the fact that you're saying, hey, I'm a professional and my patients don't have a problem with it. Hey, I'm a professional and Gen Z will come to me. Hey, I'm a professional. I have no issue in a profession like being a doctor, where you're actually, people have to sort of pretty much like trust you implicitly. It's such a welcome breath of fresh air that you're saying that, you went through a transition, your family's been supporting you, they've been so good of you. And I think those are also kind of stories we need to hear, because sometimes I feel bad news travels faster than good news, and your kind of story will actually inspire a lot of people. It's really cool.
Good to hear that.
Moulee, I want to ask you more specifically about this DEI bit, because I think that DEI is great for actual businesses to understand what that is.
All right, like DEI is policies and procedures, and also programs to promote a representation of underrepresented groups. And when I say underrepresented groups, and over the years, it has changed, or we have had more underrepresented communities included in the process. So 10 years back, it was only a gender aspect that organizations were looking at, underrepresentation of women. If I have to say today, it would be underrepresentation of cishet women. And then we also had persons with disabilities, where we have a less representation of persons with disabilities in the workplace. And now we have LGBT persons. And there's also this interesting thing when you ask a question to Dr. Priya about Gen Z and millennials, or the generational gap. There is also an aspect of diversity we need to look at when it comes to generational diversity, because in workplace, we do not have persons from single age group. We have people who are in their 50s, and we have people as young as in their early 20s. And how do we see things, or what do we want in the workplace, is also something we need to address it. Because even when we talk about the LGBT community, we have older LGBT persons who are in their 50s, who had to live all their life in a very different environment where such open conversations never happened. And then we have young persons who are entering the workforce, who have been out right from their teenage. And what is it that these two groups of people who are part of the LGBT community need in the workplace? So that is also something, organizations are looking at. Like, what does the generational diversity look at? For me, example is like a gay man or any queer person who are in their 40s and 50s and who are working in a corporate, in a formal sector. What is their necessity in their life? What are the benefits that they require from their workplace versus what are the benefits that younger generation need from the organization is very different. And how do we address this is also a way that organization needs to approach very scientifically through data. And that is something, we need to keep having this conversation, because for a lot of us, who are in their late 30s, 40s, and 50s, we are entering an unknown space when it comes to LGBT inclusion in the corporates. And it has always been a trial and error.
Right.
Like, what is it that I need from my employer? And, for older queer persons, the health issues are very different. And especially for trans persons, trans-specific health benefits, like,
it's very different.
Is the insurance in the organization addressing those aspects? These kind of, it keeps evolving as we talk about this diversity and inclusion every day. So I think that's the reason for us to keep updating ourselves. And I don't also necessarily see this as a woke conversation, as a conversation trying to accommodate just younger persons, because this is also a conversation that we need to have constantly to include elders within the organization.
Also. Aishwarya, we've got these new labor laws coming into the country now about, how work hours are going to be different and how PFs will be different. And the government is constantly trying to do these new things to sort of adapt to workplaces and, make it more relevant. Do you think there's also a time where we need to have the government sort of stepping in and also having some sort of legislation, some legal aspect which comes into people in the workplace with LGBTQI? You think that's something, Aishwarya, we should start looking at? You think it will happen? You foresee it in the future, or is this mythical, it will never happen, you think, in India?
Of course, that's the most desirable thing, to have like a legislation which says that you cannot discriminate not just against LGBTQ people, but people of any minorities, any marginalization. You cannot discriminate against them. But sadly, we do not have such a law, and like I don't see it coming forth very soon either, because we're still like building up. Like from 377, we're still trying to get the government to just accept us as equal citizens in that sense. So it's going to be a struggle, but that's something that is going to be like really helpful. Like even something like housing for that matter, because a lot of LGBTQ people face a lot of discrimination in respect to like accessing housing and other services, but there's no such law which says okay, you cannot discriminate against a gay person when you're renting out a house to them. So we don't have those laws as yet, but they need to be in place for sure.
Now, in terms of just like being focused on LGBTQ members, all right, there are companies like Kitisu and, there's the Mitra Trust and companies like that which have done stuff to sort of motivate members. What is it that, Venkat, you think companies can actually do? What is that one thing you think that companies can start doing to actually say, let's create that place which is open for a conversation? I'll tell you why I'm saying this. My company, one of the first few employees we hired, he wasn't openly gay, but I know he was gay because we knew about it. But even when we tried to start that dialogue a few times, and this was me heading the company, Venkat, it never really went out. So I realized it was actually very challenging because we also were at a point where we didn't know whether we had to just go and openly ask him, say, hey, listen, if you're gay, be proud of it, or he could turn around and be like, hey, why are you saying this to me, right? Because that's also a very thin line, Venkat. So how do you actually have this conversation? Because I personally had this problem where I was like, hello, I'm so open and proud, and if you come out, the whole company is going to be so supportive. But what happens? How do you actually create that space for employees? Sometimes that's difficult also.
Okay, so I lost a little bit of it, Paras, so I'm going to take the liberty of just paraphrasing it. So your question is, how do you create an open space for people to come out? Is that your question, or keep the conversation going?
That's right. And besides just saying it, because what happens is you might just say it, but I think if the employees don't feel like they actually radiate it, and I'm saying it from my company, we said it with full intention, but people still don't feel safe. Now I feel sometimes that may not be the companies doing, that may be just their own mindset.
I think it's two things. I do have a strong point of view on this, so thank you again for the question. I think coming out is a very personal journey, right? And I'm sure each one of us in this call knows that in a very different capacity, right? It has overlays of coming out to yourself, I think, which is really number one. Then family, society, the legal landscape, then your work, etc. So I don't, while I do head the ERG at Accenture, we do have a sizable number of people around. I'm very sensitive. I do say in open forums that the journey is not about you to come out. It's not about anyone coming out. The journey is about creating a safe and secure workplace, no matter who you are, where you are, and what you're doing. And, honestly, if you have not come out and you're not comfortable to, and you want to blend in with the allies, fantastic. So be it. At least don't censor a part of yourself, while you're at work. Now, step two, how do you keep the conversation going? And we've tried very, very many things, right? We actually appointed a person from the community as the India sponsor for a few years, so that people could know that you could be, a senior person, you could have a career here, and, you had a visible role model. We've tried. We've had, every month we host what we call as Hues of the Rainbow, where any willing member of the community comes and shares their coming out story, challenges that they have faced, takes questions from the audience. You're breaking those barriers. We do have at a global, at an India, at a APAC as well as an India level, what we call as L3, LGBT Leaders Learning Program. So in 2012, when I went to the program, it used to be only for queer people. And we were 46 of us across the spectrum of, gender and sexuality from around the world who got together. We were with Stonewall for that week, where we learned how to narrate our stories, build a plan for our country, and then, wrapped up with the Pride March in the country. Subsequently, over the years, we've now expanded it to the allies, which means it's a joint learning experience, curated for 3-4 days, where it's a residential program where you learn how to, how to interact. You actually work through subconscious bias and ability to narrate a very powerful story as an ally or as a community member. We've actually set up the ERG. The ERG is a closed group. We don't invite anybody who's not a member of the community into the ERG. And very recently, we concluded, last Friday, we had our first ever Parenting with Pride, where parents, employees who are parents of queer children, and my mom, also participated in it, where we just had a conversation on what does it mean when your child comes out, how do you need to be prepared. So Paras, long story short, I think we don't have the perfect solution, but I'd encourage multiple ways and means. Try at least a new experiment once a quarter on how you can creatively bring up the conversation again, so that different things stick with different audiences.
I think creative ways of bringing up a conversation is always a good thing. When I'm in a place, when I'm with elders, when I'm with corporates, I very casually mention I'm dating this boy. And the moment you've said it so casually, you've started a conversation. And right there, by doing something as effortless as that, I feel like you break so many barriers. And I think for me, that works. And for different people, different things will work. Venkat, thank you so much. There are so many people like me, CEO founder members, who are going to take a leaf from your book. I'm so happy with everything that we've discussed today, because there's so much for me to actually think about. Alex, Aishwarya, Moulee, Dr. Priya. Thank you so much for telling us all of these things, because the perspective that every single one of you has is so different. And I like how Venkat's background sums it up so beautifully. Pride means more. I hope the Pride Month is not just about rainbow flags and celebrations and, not just about that. It also, let's face it, is a great talking point. And I hope that you use the Pride Month not just to put the flag, but to actually do more. And I hope this conversation inspires you guys enough, and make sure the Pride journey continues 12 months and not just in one. Bye-bye, guys. Thank you so much for joining us.